The moment I realized I didn't exist in her universe was crystallized in a single breath. There she stood, radiant under the spotlight, clutching her crystal award like it was the Holy Grail. Tears of triumph glistening in her eyes as she thanked literally everyone, including the goddamn cleaning staff, except me. And I simply must acknowledge our incredible janitorial team who kept our spaces immaculate while we pulled those brutal all-nighters. Eva's voice cracked with what the audience surely perceived as genuine emotion. The crowd erupted in applause. I stood there, champagne turning warm in my hand, watching as the woman I'd sacrificed my career pinnacle for basked in adoration. Her eyes swept over the crowd, passing over me like I was just another potted plant decorating the venue. In that moment, I felt something inside me snap with surgical precision. 7 days ago, I had canceled the presentation of my life's work, a revolutionary synthetic skin graft that could save thousands of burn victims, to be her emotional support animal. 7 days of rehearsing her speech until 3 a.m., 7 days of reassuring her that, yes, she deserved that creative director position. 7 days of putting my research team on hold because only you can be my rock, Leo. And now I was invisible. I set my champagne flute down on a passing waiter's tray and walked out. No dramatic scene, no confrontation, just the quiet dignity of a man who finally understood his market value in someone else's life. The night air hit my face like clarity itself. New York hummed around me, indifferent to my epiphany. I loosened my tie, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt weightless. Like I'd finally put down a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. I hailed a cab, but I didn't give the driver our apartment address. Biotech Park? Eastside Labs, I said instead. Where my real life waited for me. My lab was deserted at this hour. Just the low hum of equipment and the soft blue emergency lights creating an atmosphere of scientific serenity. I swiped my key card and entered the sterile environment that had always felt more like home than any place I'd shared with Eva. I flipped on the lights and walked to my workstation. The prototype of our synthetic dermis sat in its temperature-controlled case, translucent, viable, miraculous. I ran my fingers over the case, feeling a connection to this creation that was pure and uncomplicated. At least you don't pretend I don't exist, I murmured to it. I sat down at my computer and pulled up my email. Dr. Alistair Finch from the Max Planck Institute had been trying to reach me for weeks. He'd seen our preliminary papers and wanted to discuss potential collaboration. I'd put him off because of Eva's big presentation. For a brief moment, doubt flickered through me. Was I being impulsive? Overreacting? I'd built a life with Eva over 3 years, but then I remembered her eyes sweeping past me, the calculated omission in her speech. This wasn't impulse. This was long overdue clarity. I was making a data-driven decision, just as I did in my research. I started typing. Dr. Finch, I apologize for my delayed response. If your offer to discuss our work is still open, I'm available immediately. In fact, I can be in Geneva by tomorrow afternoon if that would be convenient. Sincerely, Dr. Leo Carcian. I hit send, then opened my browser and booked a one-way ticket to Geneva, leaving in 4 hours. I didn't pack much, a change of clothes, my passport, and an external hard drive containing 3 years of research data. I left my phone on silent, buried in my bag. As the taxi took me to JFK, I thought about Eva waking up tomorrow, realizing I wasn't there. Would she even notice before her first client meeting? Would she care, or would she just be annoyed that her emotional support wasn't standing by? I felt no satisfaction in imagining her confusion, only a strange clinical detachment, like I was observing someone else's failed relationship experiment. The celebration after-party dragged on until nearly 3 a.m. Eva floated from group to group, accepting congratulations, sharing inspiring anecdotes about creative perseverance and drinking just enough expensive champagne to maintain her pleasant buzz without becoming sloppy. "You absolutely killed that presentation for Aston Martin," gushed Trent, the agency's senior art director. "The way you connected luxury with environmental consciousness? Genius." "Oh, that was a team effort," Eva said with practiced humility, even as she glowed from the praise. "But seriously, that speech tonight? I saw Marcus tearing up, and that man is made of stone," Trent continued, referring to their normally stoic CEO. Eva smiled, but for the first time that evening, a tiny flicker of unease passed through her. She hadn't seen Leo in a while. In fact, she couldn't remember seeing him since her speech. He was probably mingling somewhere, she reasoned. Or maybe he'd stepped out for some air. Leo hated crowded events. It wasn't until she finally hailed a cab home, her feet aching from standing in Louboutins all night, that real concern began to seep in. The apartment was dark when she entered. "Leo," she called out, flipping on lights. No answer. His side of the closet looked undisturbed, but his laptop was gone from his desk. Eva kicked off her heels and checked her phone. No messages. "He's probably just working late," she murmured to herself, though Leo never worked this late without telling her. The doubt crept in, but she pushed it aside, too exhausted and intoxicated to process it fully. She fell asleep alone, still wearing her party makeup. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight and a pounding headache. Eva reached for Leo's side of the bed, empty and cold. She sat up too quickly, wincing at the stab of pain behind her eyes. "Leo?" she called again, louder this time. The apartment responded with silence. Now worry began to bloom in earnest. She grabbed her phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. She tried again, same result. She sent a text. "Where are you? Getting worried. Call me." She showered quickly, trying to wash away both last night's makeup and the growing anxiety. By the time she emerged, wrapped in a towel, she was fully alert and increasingly alarmed. Leo had never disappeared like this. She called his lab. "East Side Biotechnology." "Dr. Park speaking," answered Leo's research assistant. "Sarah, it's Eva. Is Leo there?" A pause. "Dr. Karsian isn't available. He's taken an indefinite leave of absence." Eva's stomach dropped. "What? Since when?" "Since last night," Sarah replied, her tone distinctly cool. "He submitted the paperwork electronically at midnight and delegated his ongoing projects. Is there something I can help you with?" "Did he say where he was going?" Eva's voice had risen an octave. "I'm not at liberty to discuss Dr. Karsian's personal arrangements," Sarah said formally. "Now, if you'll excuse me, we're quite busy transitioning his workload." The line went dead before Eva could respond. She sat heavily on the bed, water from her hair dripping onto the duvet. Leave of absence? Delegated projects? This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was planned. And suddenly, with perfect clarity, she remembered her speech. Word for word, thanking everyone from her team to the building maintenance staff. Everyone except the man who had canceled his career-defining conference to support her. The room seemed to tilt. What had she done? She called in sick to work, her first day as creative director, and she couldn't even show up. Instead, she spent the day calling everyone who might know where Leo had gone. His parents hadn't heard from him. His sister was equally clueless. His colleagues at the lab were polite but firmly unhelpful. By evening, she'd pieced together that he'd taken an international flight, but no one would confirm where. She sat in their living room, surrounded by evidence of their life together. Photos from hiking in Vermont, the weird modernist lamp they'd bought at that flea market in Brooklyn, his worn copy of Principles of Regenerative Medicine on the coffee table. She picked up the book and a boarding pass fell out, his canceled ticket to Geneva. The conference he'd sacrificed for her, the presentation that was supposed to secure funding for his research project, the culmination of 3 years of work, and she hadn't even mentioned him in her speech. "What have I done?" she whispered to the empty apartment. Geneva was crisp and clear, the Alps visible in the distance, the lake shimmering under autumn sunlight. I felt like I'd stepped into a parallel universe, where the last 6 months of emotional labor had never happened. Dr. Finch met me at his office at the University of Geneva Medical Center. He was older than I expected, with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that evaluated everything with scientific precision. "Dr. Carcian," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I must say your sudden availability was unexpected, but most welcome." I managed a tight smile. "Sometimes life clears your calendar for you." He gave me a curious look, but didn't pry. Instead, he led me to a conference room where several other researchers were waiting. For the next 3 hours, I presented my work on synthetic skin grafts, the work I should have presented at the conference. The questions were insightful, the discussion stimulating. Nobody asked me how I felt about it or required emotional reassurance. It was purely about the science, and it was exhilarating. Our synthetic dermis wasn't just another skin substitute. What made it revolutionary was its proprietary matrix of nanofibers that allowed for unprecedented cellular integration. While other grafts were essentially sophisticated bandages, ours became living tissue. We'd developed a way to seed the patient's own stem cells into the matrix, creating a graft that wouldn't just cover wounds, but would actually regenerate the patient's own skin. For severe burn victims, this wasn't just a medical advancement. It was the difference between survival with debilitating scarring and a chance at normal life. I explained the clinical trials we'd begun, showing before and after images of test cases where third-degree burns had healed with minimal scarring and near-normal tissue elasticity. The room fell silent as I displayed the images of a 7-year-old girl who'd been caught in a house fire. Her before pictures showed the raw, devastated skin of her arms and torso. The after images, taken just 6 weeks post-treatment, showed healing that would have taken years with conventional methods. "This is remarkable," murmured one of the senior researchers. "The cellular architecture is almost indistinguishable from normal dermis." I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with ego and everything to do with purpose. This was why I had become a scientist. This was what mattered. After the presentation, Dr. Finch invited me to dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the lake. As we waited for our meals, he leaned forward. "Your work is extraordinary, Leo. May I call you Leo?" I nodded, sipping my wine. "We've been developing complementary technology in cellular regeneration at our Munich facility," he continued. "I believe there could be significant synergy between our projects." "I'm listening," I said, my interest genuinely piqued. "We have the facilities, the funding, and the team. What we lack is someone with your specific expertise and vision to lead this particular research direction." He paused. "I'm offering you a position, full research autonomy, a substantial budget, and a 5-year commitment." I set down my glass carefully. "That's generous." "It's strategic," he corrected. "Your approach to dermal regeneration is years ahead of anyone else in the field. Combined with our vascular integration techniques, we could revolutionize burn treatment globally." For the first time since I'd left New York, I felt something other than cold detachment. I felt possibility. "When would you need my decision?" I asked. "Ideally, tonight," he smiled apologetically. "We're finalizing budget allocations for the next fiscal year. I need to know if I'm reserving a significant portion for your department." My department. The words hung in the air like an intoxicating promise. "What about my team in New York?" I asked, thinking of Sarah and the others who had worked with me for years. "We can accommodate key personnel transfers if they are willing to relocate," he said. "Though I understand that might be complicated by personal circumstances." His eyes held a question. I took another sip of wine. My personal circumstances have recently become significantly less complicated, I said evenly. Dr. Finch nodded, seeming to understand everything I wasn't saying. Then shall we discuss the details? By midnight, I had accepted a position as Director of Regenerative Dermis Research at the Max Planck Institute in Munich, with a salary that made my New York compensation look insulting and resources beyond anything I'd had access to before. I sent a brief email to my team in New York, offering positions to those willing to relocate. Then I booked a flight to Munich for the following day. I checked my phone for the first time in 24 hours. 27 missed calls from Eva, 43 text messages, their tone evolving from confused to worried to frantic. I scrolled through them dispassionately, as if reading case notes on a patient I'd never met. The last one simply read, "Please just tell me you're okay." I typed back, "I'm fine. I've accepted a position in Munich. I'll make arrangements for my things." Then I turned off my phone again and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. Ava's world was collapsing with meticulous precision. First, her personal life imploded with Leo's disappearance. Then her professional triumph began to unravel. She'd missed her first day as creative director. On her second day, distracted and sleep-deprived, she'd approved mock-ups for a campaign that contained a significant error in the client's brand guidelines. By day 3, Marcus was giving her concerned looks and asking if she was settling in all right. "I'm fine," she'd assured him with the fake confidence that had always carried her through difficult situations. "Just working through some personal matters." But she wasn't fine. Leo's terse message about Munich had sent her into a tailspin. He'd accepted a job in another country without discussion, without negotiation, without even a proper goodbye. It was so unlike him. Leo, who analyzed every decision from multiple angles, who never acted impulsively. Except she was beginning to realize that this wasn't impulsive at all. This was calculated. This was Leo applying his scientific methodology to their relationship and reaching a conclusion. She'd failed his hypothesis. She'd proven herself unworthy of the investment. The Aston Martin campaign she'd been so proud of now seemed hollow and meaningless. What did it matter if rich people bought slightly greener luxury cars when Leo was developing technology that could save burn victims from lifelong suffering? Her creative genius was just clever manipulation of consumer psychology. His work was actually changing lives. By week 3, she'd made another critical error, confusing presentation decks for 2 different clients, sending the wrong strategy to both. Marcus called her into his office. "Ava," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I know you fought hard for this position, and you deserve it. But whatever's going on in your personal life is affecting your work in ways we can't sustain. Maybe you need some time." The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd prioritized this job over the man who loved her, and now she was failing at the very thing she had chosen. That evening, she sat alone in their apartment, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table, staring at her phone. She drafted countless messages to Leo, each more desperate than the last, but hadn't sent any of them. What could she possibly say that would matter now? She pulled up Instagram, mindlessly scrolling, when a post from Eastside Labs caught her eye. It was an announcement about their synthetic skin project continuing under new leadership, with a photo of the research team. They all looked so professional, focused, like they'd moved on seamlessly without Leo. Just as she'd assumed she could function without acknowledging his importance. After a week of sleepless nights and increasingly concerning professional missteps, Eva did something she'd never done before. She requested personal leave from a job she'd just started. "Family emergency," she told Marcus vaguely, hating the lie but unable to admit the truth. That she'd sacrificed her relationship on the altar of her ambition and was now trying desperately to perform damage control. Marcus was surprisingly understanding. "Take the time you need," he said. "The Aston Martin campaign is in good shape, and the team can handle the day-to-day. Just keep me posted. 24 hours later, she was on a flight to Munich, having pieced together from Sarah, who had finally taken pity on her, that Leo was now working at the prestigious Max Planck Institute. She hadn't warned him she was coming. She wasn't entirely sure what she would say when she saw him. All she knew was that the gaping hole in her life wouldn't close until she faced him directly. The Max Planck Institute was an imposing structure of glass and steel, simultaneously futuristic and timeless. Eva stood outside, her designer clothes and Manhattan confidence suddenly feeling like costume pieces, inappropriate and artificial. She approached the reception desk with as much poise as she could muster. "I'm here to see Dr. Leo Karsian," she said, hating the slight tremor in her voice. The receptionist typed something into her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent. Personal matter. Could you please tell him Eva Winters is here to see him?" The receptionist looked dubious, but made the call. Eva couldn't hear what was said on the other end, but after a moment, the woman hung up and said, "Dr. Karsian will be down shortly. You can wait in the atrium." Eva's heart hammered as she paced the sleek lobby. What would he look like? Would he be angry? Cold? Would there be anything left of the man who had held her through anxiety attacks and celebrated her small victories? When he appeared through the glass doors of what appeared to be a laboratory wing, her breath caught. He looked different, more confident somehow. His posture straighter, his movements more deliberate. He wore a white lab coat over a crisp blue shirt, a security badge clipped to his pocket. He looked like he belonged here, in this temple of science and innovation. He saw her and paused almost imperceptibly before walking over, his expression composed. "Eva," he said, his voice neutral, "what are you doing here?" No hug, no smile, just that clinical assessment she'd seen him use on problematic research results. I needed to see you," she said, her carefully rehearsed speech evaporating. "You just disappeared." Something flickered in his eyes, not warmth but a brief acknowledgement. "Let's not do this here," he said quietly, glancing at curious onlookers. "There's a cafe across the street. We can talk there." The cafe was quiet and modern, with minimalist furniture and large windows overlooking a small park. Leo ordered coffee in flawless German, another reminder that she was on his territory now. When they were seated, Eva could no longer contain herself. "How could you just leave it like that? No goodbye, no discussion. 3 years together and you send a text and vanish?" Leo took a measured sip of his coffee before responding. "Would you have preferred a scene at your celebration? Should I have publicly pointed out that you thanked the janitorial staff but not your partner who gave up a career opportunity for you?" His calm was infuriating. Eva wanted him to yell, to show some emotion, to give her something she could fight against. "I made a mistake," she admitted, her voice cracking. "A terrible, thoughtless mistake. I was caught up in the moment." "No," Leo interrupted, his voice still even. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. What you did was make a statement. You stood in front of your colleagues, your mentors, your entire professional world, and you demonstrated exactly what you value and what you don't." The precision of his words cut deeper than any angry outburst could have. "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "Isn't it?" He leaned forward slightly. "Eva, I'm a scientist. I observe, I analyze data, I draw conclusions. And the data from that night was unambiguous. You thanked everyone who contributed to your success, except me. The cleaning staff made the list, but the man who canceled the most important presentation of his career didn't merit a mention." Put so starkly, it sounded even worse than it had in her own recriminating thoughts. "I love you," she said desperately. Leo sighed, the first crack in his composed facade. "I believe you think you do, but love without respect isn't love, Eva. It's just need. I do respect you, she insisted. No, you respect what I do for you. There's a difference, he paused. Do you know what happened after I left your party? I contacted Dr. Finch, flew to Geneva, and presented my research. Research that should have been presented at the conference I missed for you. And instead of finding a room of bored academics who had already moved on to the next big thing, I found genuine interest. Dr. Finch offered me this position on the spot. Full research autonomy, 5 times the resources I had in New York. A small, bitter smile touched his lips. In 48 hours, I went from being the invisible boyfriend holding your emotional baggage to the director of a cutting-edge research department. And do you know what the strangest part is? I would have turned it down for you. If you had acknowledged what I gave up, if you had shown even a hint that you valued my sacrifice, I would have stayed. Ava felt tears spilling down her cheeks, not caring who saw. What can I do? She whispered. How do I fix this? Leo looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, she saw something like compassion in his eyes. That's the thing, Ava, there's nothing to fix. What happened wasn't a malfunction in our relationship. It was a revelation of what our relationship actually was. He paused. You're not a bad person. You're just someone who was so focused on climbing that you didn't notice who you were stepping on. So that's it? She asked, disbelief coloring her voice. 3 years and you're just done? I'm not done, he said quietly. I'm beginning. For the first time in years, I'm prioritizing my work, my purpose without apology or compromise. Do you have any idea how that feels? The awful thing was, she did know. It was exactly how she'd felt standing on that stage accepting her award before everything had collapsed. What about us? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Leo considered her question carefully. There is no us right now, Eva. There's you in New York with your new position, and there's me here with mine, 2 separate lives. It doesn't have to be that way, she pressed. I can look for work here. Munich has advertising agencies. I could stop, he said gently. Do you hear yourself? Your immediate solution is to transplant yourself into my new life. That's not fixing the fundamental problem. Then what is? She demanded, frustration bleeding through her grief. Growth, he said simply. Real change for both of us. I need to remember how to exist without subordinating my needs to someone else's. And you, he hesitated. I need to learn how to love someone without making them disappear. She finished for him, a painful realization dawning. He nodded slowly. Something like that. They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation settling between them. So there's no chance? She finally asked. Leo looked out the window at the park where scientists and students were enjoying the autumn sunshine. I'm not saying never, he said finally. I'm saying not now, not like this. We both need time. I need to build this new chapter of my life, and you need to figure out who you are when you're not performing for an audience. It wasn't what she wanted to hear, but it wasn't a complete dismissal either. A tiny seed of hope took root amid the devastation. Can I at least know you're okay? She asked. Can we stay in touch? He seemed to weigh this request carefully. Limited contact, he finally said. We can email occasionally. I need space, Eva. Real space. Not the kind where you're texting every day asking if I've thought about things. She nodded, willing to accept any terms if it meant the door wasn't completely closed. I should get back to the lab, he said, checking his watch. We're running trials on a new cellular matrix today. His eyes lit up slightly as he mentioned his work, and Eva saw a glimpse of the passionate scientist she'd first fallen for, except now that passion wasn't being dimmed by her demands. They walked back to the institute in silence. At the entrance, she gathered her courage and asked, Can I hug you goodbye? Leo hesitated, then gave a small nod. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, breathing in his familiar scent. His embrace was brief and restrained, nothing like the warm, enveloping hugs she remembered. "Goodbye, Eva," he said, stepping back. "Take care of yourself." "You too," she whispered. She watched as he swiped his security card and disappeared back into his new world, a world where he was valued, respected, and seen. As she turned to leave, she noticed a newspaper on a nearby bench. The headline caught her eye: "Breakthrough in Synthetic Skin Research. Max Planck Institute announces new department head." Below was a photo of Leo looking professional and confident, standing next to Dr. Finch. She picked up the paper and read the first paragraph. "Dr. Leo Karsian, formerly of Eastside Biotechnology in New York, has been appointed Director of Regenerative Dermis Research at the prestigious Max Planck Institute. Dr. Karsian's pioneering work in synthetic skin grafts for burn victims has been described by colleagues as a revolutionary and potentially life-saving for thousands." A small, sad smile touched her lips. This was who he was when he wasn't living in her shadow, not just her supportive boyfriend, but a brilliant scientist doing work that mattered, work that saved lives. She had been so blinded by her own ambition that she'd reduced him to a supporting character in her story, when all along he'd been the hero of his own. 6 months passed. Munich transformed from autumn gold to winter white, then gradually to spring green. My life settled into a productive rhythm. Long days in the lab, collaboration with brilliant colleagues, visible progress on our synthetic skin project. We'd already begun limited clinical trials with promising results. Unlike in New York, where I'd often been the quiet genius in the background, here I emerged as a natural leader. My team of 12 researchers looked to me not just for scientific guidance, but for vision. I found myself stepping into this role with surprising ease, as if I'd finally found the space to become the person I was meant to be. "Dr. Karsian, could you review these culture results?" Mom Mylene, one of our most brilliant researchers, approached my desk one afternoon. "The cellular adhesion is stronger than projected." I examined the data, feeling that familiar thrill of discovery. "The enhanced fibroblast activity is remarkable. Let's run a comparative analysis against last month's trials." "Already started," she replied with a smile. "The team thought you'd want to see that immediately." This was the difference. Here, my instincts were anticipated, my expertise valued without question. I wasn't someone's emotional support system. I was a respected scientist doing vital work. I'd adapted to life in Germany with surprising ease. My apartment overlooking the English Garden became a sanctuary of calm efficiency. No emotional chaos, no last-minute crises requiring my intervention. Just clean space, good books, and the satisfaction of meaningful work. Eva and I maintained sporadic email contact, as promised. Her messages were initially emotional, full of updates about therapy and realizations about her patterns. I responded politely but briefly. Over time, her emails became less frequent and more substantive. She'd left her position at the New York agency. The triumph felt hollow, she wrote, and had taken a step back career-wise to work at a smaller firm that specialized in nonprofit campaigns. "Less prestige, more purpose," she explained. I found myself genuinely glad for her. In March, she mentioned she'd been offered a position with an international agency that had offices in several European cities, including Munich. "I'm not telling you this to pressure you," she wrote. "I just wanted you to know that I'm considering it because the work is meaningful, not because I'm trying to insert myself back into your life. I understand the boundaries you've set." I sat with that email for several days before responding. "The work sounds interesting. Munich is a good city. There's enough space here for both of us." It wasn't an invitation, but it wasn't a rejection either. In April, Dr. Finch called me into his office. "The graft trials are exceeding expectations," he said without preamble. "The hospital board is impressed, and more importantly, patients are responding well." I allowed myself a small smile. The vascular inauguration is better than we predicted. Indeed. He leaned back in his chair. There's a medical technology conference in Berlin next month. They've asked us to present our preliminary findings. I'd like you to take the lead. I felt a surge of satisfaction. I'd be honored. Excellent. He handed me a folder. Here's the information. It's quite a prestigious event. Significant media presence, potential investors, the works. I flipped through the materials, noting the caliber of other presenters. This was exactly the type of recognition our work deserved. Oh, Dr. Finch added casually, you are permitted a +1 for the gala dinner, should you wish to bring someone. I looked up, catching the knowing glint in his eye. In 6 months, he'd never once pried into my personal life. But he was observant enough to have noticed the subtle shift in my demeanor recently. I'll keep that in mind, I said neutrally. That evening, I drafted an email to Eva. I'm presenting our research results at the European Medical Technology Conference in Berlin next month. There's a formal dinner following the presentation. If you're interested, you'd be welcome to attend as my guest. No pressure either way. Her response came within hours. I'd be honored to attend. Just tell me when and where. And Leo, thank you for thinking of me. The night of the conference arrived with perfect late spring weather. The presentation went flawlessly. Our research data was compelling, the audience engaged, the questions insightful. I felt the unique satisfaction that comes from being recognized for work that matters. Afterward, in the grand ballroom of the hotel, I stood with a glass of champagne, discussing potential applications with a Swiss medical device manufacturer when I saw her enter. Eva had always known how to make an entrance, but this was different from her usual dramatic flair. She wore a simple dark blue gown, elegant but understated. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, her makeup minimal. She paused at the entrance, scanning the room until she spotted me. Our eyes met across the crowded space, and she gave me a small, tentative smile before making her way toward me. Dr. Karsian, said my companion, noticing my distraction. Is that someone you know? Yes, I replied, watching Eva navigate through the crowd with graceful determination. Someone I used to know quite well. Would you excuse me for a moment? We met in the middle of the room, a small island of stillness amid the swirl of conversation and clinking glasses. You were brilliant up there, she said simply. I didn't understand all the technical aspects, but I could see how important it is, what you're creating. Thank you for coming, I said, surprised by how genuinely pleased I was to see her. Thank you for inviting me. She hesitated. I've been in Munich for 3 weeks. I wanted to tell you, but I was trying to respect your space. I nodded, appreciating the effort that must have cost her. The old Eva would have shown up at my lab unannounced, expecting accommodation. Would you like a drink? I offered. I'd like that, she said. As I guided her toward the bar, Dr. Finch intercepted us. Ah, Leo, excellent presentation. The Johansson Group is particularly interested in discussing manufacturing possibilities. He turned to Eva with polite curiosity. Dr. Alistair Finch, this is Eva Winters, I said. I paused, unsure how to describe her. An old friend, Eva supplied smoothly, extending her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Finch. Leo's work with you sounds fascinating. It's entirely his vision, Finch said generously. I merely provided the resources. He's revolutionizing the field. He glanced between us with subtle assessment. I won't keep you. Enjoy the evening. As he moved away, Eva turned to me with a genuine smile. He thinks very highly of you. He's been an excellent mentor, I said, and a good friend in his way. We found a quiet corner with our drinks, away from the main crush of the crowd. For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of our history suspended between us. How have you been, really? I finally asked. Avia considered the question carefully. Humbled, she said eventually. Rebuilding, learning how to measure success differently. She looked directly at me. missing you but trying to earn the right to do so. There was no manipulation in her words, no calculated performance, just simple honesty. "And you?" she asked. "Are you happy here?" "I'm fulfilled," I answered truthfully. "The work is challenging and meaningful. I'm respected for what I contribute, not for what I provide to someone else." She winced slightly, but nodded. "You deserve that. You always did." Another pause, more comfortable than the last. "I saw a video of a little girl who received one of your skin grafts," she said suddenly. "Her parents posted it online. She was dancing in her hospital room, showing off her healing arms. She said she felt like a superhero with her new skin." I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat. "I didn't know about that." "You're changing lives, Leo," she said softly. "Real lives. While I was chasing awards for luxury car campaigns, you were doing something that actually matters." "Your work matters too," I said, surprising myself with the generosity. "Different way, different impact. But it matters." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "My new position focuses on health communication, helping medical breakthroughs reach the people who need them. It's still advertising, but with purpose." "That sounds worthwhile," I acknowledged. A server passed with hors d'oeuvres and we both reached for the same plate. Our fingers brushed briefly, the first physical contact in 6 months. Neither of us pulled away immediately. "I'm not asking for anything," Ava said as we moved apart. "I just want you to know that I see you now, really see you, not as an extension of myself or a support system, but as Leo Carcian, brilliant scientist, saving lives one cell at a time." I studied her face, looking for signs of the old manipulative Eva, but found only sincerity. "Would you like to have dinner tomorrow?" I heard myself asking. "Just dinner, neutral territory." Hope flashed across her face, quickly tempered by careful restraint. "I'd like that very much." As the evening wore on, we maintained a respectful distance, circulating separately through the crowd. I introduced her to colleagues not as my ex or my date, but simply as Eva Winters, communications specialist. She spoke intelligently with researchers, asking insightful questions about how to translate complex medical concepts for public understanding. Watching her from across the room, I realized something important. I didn't need her anymore. My life was full and meaningful without her. But perhaps someday there might be space to want her in it again. Not as a life raft or an emotional caretaker, but as an equal partner. At the end of the night, I walked her to her taxi. "Thank you for tonight," she said, standing in the warm spring air, "for the invitation and for considering a new beginning." "It's just dinner," I cautioned. "I know," she smiled, "but it's more than I deserve, and I'm grateful." She didn't try to kiss me or even hug me. She simply got into the taxi with dignity and purpose. As I watched the cab pull away, I felt a strange sense of completion. 6 months ago, I had walked away from her celebration because she had rendered me invisible. Tonight, I had invited her into my world on my terms, and for the first time, she had truly seen me. The following evening, our dinner stretched into hours of conversation that felt both familiar and entirely new. We talked about work, about Munich, about the books we'd read in our time apart. What we didn't talk about was us or the future. It was just two people relearning each other without expectations or demands. As weeks passed, we established a careful rhythm: coffee once a week, occasional dinners, a Sunday walking through the English garden. We were building something from the ground up, different from what we had before. One morning in late summer, I received a call from Dr. Finch. "Leo, remember that 7-year-old from the clinical trial? Sophia? Her family is here. They've asked to meet you." An hour later, I stood in our reception area as a small girl with bright eyes and a vibrant smile ran toward me. She wore a short-sleeved dress that proudly displayed her arms that had once been devastated by fire, now healed with just the faintest traces of our synthetic skin graft, visible if you knew what to look for. Dr. Leo, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around my waist. Mom said I had to thank you for my superhero skin. I knelt down to her level, momentarily speechless. Her parents approached, the mother wiping tears from her eyes. Dr. Karsian, her father said, voice thick with emotion, we wanted you to see what you've done, what you've given back to our daughter. As Sophia chattered excitedly about returning to gymnastics and swimming, I caught sight of Eva standing quietly in the doorway. I hadn't known she was coming today. Our eyes met over Sophia's head, and I saw in her gaze not just admiration but profound respect. Not for what I could give her, but for who I was. That evening, Eva and I sat on a bench overlooking the river, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The comfortable silence between us felt like a luxury after all the painful words we'd exchanged. I've accepted the position here, she said finally. It starts next month. I nodded, letting the information settle. Are you ready for that change? I am, she said with quiet certainty. The agency works with medical research institutions to communicate breakthroughs to the public. It's everything I'm good at, but channeled towards something meaningful. That sounds right for you, I acknowledged. She turned to face me directly. I want to be clear about something, Leo. I'm not moving here with expectations. I don't assume that because we've had a few good conversations, everything is fixed. I know better now. She paused. I'm moving here for the work, and because I like who I am becoming in this city. If we find our way back to each other, it will be as equals, not as satellites in orbit around each other's needs. The maturity in her words caught me by surprise. This wasn't the Eva who had taken my support for granted. This was someone who had done the painful work of self-reflection. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. As we walked back toward her hotel, she asked casually, would you be open to showing me around when I get settled? As a friend? The word hung between us, honest in its limitations and its possibilities. I'd like that, I replied. Whether tomorrow's encounters led to reconciliation or simply to a new understanding remained to be seen. But either way, I would never again be invisible. Not to her, not to myself, not to the world that needed what I had to offer. That was the real triumph, not her running after me, but me standing firmly in my own light, bright enough that she could finally see clearly what had been there all along.